Happy Mushoku Mondays, everybody. Welcome back to yet another trek of the Mushoku Tensei Jobless Reincarnation novel series. We're on volume 21, chapter 3. And I've read the next 3 chapters. I got to the point that everybody wants me to do a live recording read, like a first-time read on a recording. And so I'm going to try to get through these 3 chapters so that I can do that separately in its own thing. I was going to do like 2 chapters, but they're like, no, those gotta be together. Those 2 gotta be together. And based on this final chapter that I read, I'm like, yeah, I know what you guys want. I know where this is going. It's either going to be like a super mind-blowing thing, which it is implying that, or it's just going to be, let's just say it, Zenith stuff. I mean, I already got choked up at the end of that last chapter, so I know where it's going. I just kind of have a feeling that's where it's going. I know how you all know how I tick. You guys know my soft spot. You guys know where I get hurt a lot at, and you all want to see me break right on here. Even though when I do a pre-read, I still break. It doesn't change anything. Anyways, thank you guys for dropping by for the premiere. Hey chat, hope you guys are doing well. Hope you have a great rest of your Monday. But welcome to the Mushoku Monday. Greatly appreciate you guys' support for dropping by, your kind words. And yes, greatly appreciate everybody that supports the channel monetarily through Patreon, tips, links, super thanks, memberships, all that stuff. It means a great deal to me. It looks like last week after I told people about my personal tragedy story or sad sob story where I cry like a little baby, a lot of people came in and support, and I greatly appreciate that. It soothed my heart. Even though, like, watching myself on Mushoku Monday, I start to cry because I'm watching myself cry about this series I'm talking about. But yes, Philip with a membership, Red Shambles with a super, Tristan with a super, Zokin YT with a super, Abraham with a membership, and 10 gifted memberships. Greatly appreciate that. Gearless with 20 gifted memberships and a massive super again. Thank you so much, Gearless. It means a great deal to me. You're amazing. You said something about buying a figurine, so I guess I'm supposed to buy a figurine. I don't know, maybe that new Roxy McGurdia unpainted version that's supposed to be just like the one that Zenova has. Maybe. I don't know. We'll see. And Roy's Moist with a super. Thank you guys so much. It means a great deal to me. You guys are amazing. Thank you. Chat, tell them how amazing they are. With that said, let's just dive into it. Chapter 3, Flip the Board and Take the King. Which apparently, she's a king. It was talking about a chess match, and she would be the king piece, I guess. I don't know why they would call it a king piece, but I don't know. Maybe find something out later. We'll see. Rudius was trapped and surrounded by guards and Ch3. Ch3 was an odd one amongst the Temple Knights. She accepted Rudius, even with all of his demon friends. But it went further than that. She didn't really seem to care much about race or blood. That is true. Like, the whole situation with Bergerd and stuff, it really does kind of feel like she's not, like, crazy about that. She said, like, the Temple Knights are crazy. They're going to come here and they will die trying to defeat him. But it wasn't like she was telling them, you should all stay away from him. She was saying, be careful. Like, it was almost like she was advising them to be careful being around him and being associated with him. Not necessarily that she was saying that was wrong or anything. Like, she wasn't preaching at them, which was interesting. She was usually pretty laid back around Rudius, but this time, well, she was wearing a helmet, so who's to say? To her left was a knight that had a helmet like a skull. There was a scratch on his armor, near his heart. Rudius recalled that mark. He didn't really know the guy's name, but he had to be the knight known as Skull Ash. Next guy wore a helmet shaped like a trash can that you would see at the mill street corners. He was the only one of the 8 that was wearing a red cape. The blessed child really liked that cape. She was always wiping her grimy little hands on it. It's like her moving napkin, and he probably loves it. He had a truly unfortunate name, Dustbin. Next knight had a helmet with a flat faceplate, engraved all over it with phrases, "May you rest in peace." These guys are so edgelord. This guy was over 2 meters tall. He lifted the blessed child onto his shoulder so that she could pick fruit from the trees. She called him Gravekeeper. The 4th was Trash Sweeper. Helmet that looked like a broomstick on it. There were 3 more, but Rudius couldn't tell them apart. They all had names to do with death or graves or whatever. Cringy edgelord names. They all swelled up with pride when the blessed child called them. Oh, it was Black Coffin, Burial Shroud, and Funeral Procession. Let the Inquisition begin. I am Ch3-4, captain of the Keepers of Anastasia, and I shall serve as Inquisitor. I wonder if they're like, it's so, I kind of wonder about the whole aspect of them being so edgelordy. Like, they're so our world edgelordy. So it almost makes you think that they're like doing it because they're like trying to be childish for the sake of the blessed child. Like, she likes these doofy names, but like, who thinks it's cool to have something that looks like a, I mean, yeah, technically the style of the broom on the head helmet thing it's a style, but it's still like, it's almost like he's making him sound really childish, or it could just be simply that they are trying to be, I guess, clownish just for her. I don't know. It's weird. The 7 knights shouted their assent, beating their swords on the ground. I shall now commence the interrogation of the accused. Any objections? 6 had no objections. 1 called for immediate execution. This guy's super jealous of Rudius. I'm already calling this guy's super jealous of Rudius. All objections are overruled. Poor Whittle Dusty was disappointed. It made sense when everyone else wanted to find out more, and he was just going for the throat. Rudius would remember that. One guy overruled. Rudius would remember that. Rudius stands accused. Rudius recapped himself on how he got here, but it didn't change anything. He knew that he thought about doing some light kidnapping at some point, but he ditched that plan. He got Ch3 to help with getting his mother back instead. There had to be a mistake. Either that or someone spreading false information. Those that he knew was Aisha, Geese, Cliff. Oh, and the Pope. The Pope was the most suspicious one on that list, though it was possible that Geese had been captured and tortured. But with that in mind, he started fearing for Aisha. Yeah. The Inquisition shall now begin. Answer truthfully, Rudius. Got it. He didn't understand what was going on, but he had to stay calm. If he threw off the handle now, everything he worked for would be for nothing. Rudius Greyrat, do you admit to handing out writings, denying that demons are evil, to lead the hearts of believers astray? They had done their homework, but the Pope knew that, so it was probably in their database. I do not. Please, answer truthfully. We have evidence. I didn't hand out anything. I made sure everyone paid me. Was the price you were asking not remarkably low for a book? As you're well aware, Ch3, the accused shall not speak except to answer the Inquisitor's questions. He didn't want Ch3 to be like that. He wanted her to ask why he was sucking up to Rizard, but she was asking questions that she knew the answer to. He told her about it before. Yeah, it's kind of like, this is what we kind of need to suss out in front of... I would probably assume it's to, admit it in front of everybody else. She knows it, but it has to be sussed out. But still, yeah, it's like, okay, why are you asking these questions when you already know the answer to them? It's, of course, just to all kind of lead into... It's sort of just like, it's like real court, technically. In real court, there's a lot of cases where they'll say things that most people still already know, but it's to paint a pattern. It's almost to put you into perspective so that people can see this ending point to be even more bad. Like, not just that it happened, but to say you've done all these things premeditatively in order to get to that end goal. Like, you built into this. Reese Greyrat, you worship the demons and hold them up as gods, do you not? Reese went silent. That was one thing that he could definitely deny. No, I don't believe in gods. The knights all started roaring at him. Liar! The accused is lying! Lies! All lies! Liar! I judge the accused to be lying. Yeah, lies! The majority has decided that you're lying. This is definitely an Inquisition right here. It's like, yeah, sure. But these guys said so. Majority rule, huh? How democratic of them. That seemed to be how Inquisitions worked. This is the final question, Rudius Greyrat. Do you admit that you plotted to kidnap the blessed child? The symbol of the Holy Mills Church? I do not. I did make a bad joke along the lines once, but I never plotted anything. Of course, Rudius knew that it wasn't a joke when he first blurted it out, but he never acted on it. So in the end, it may as well have been a joke. The knight started shouting, accusing him of lying. Rudius was starting to find this whole thing kind of funny. He wanted to do an Inquisition where no one was allowed to laugh. You reply to basic questions with obvious lies, and whoever laughed first got slimed. I wonder if that's different. I wonder if the Japanese right there is different. Slimed, I don't know if they typically have like slimes in game shows in Japan, but they do have a lot of interesting punishments in Japanese game shows. And I wonder if that, because slimes is more like a Western thing with like Nickelodeon stuff. I'm curious if that's a different punishment, because I've seen a lot of don't laugh game shows. A lot of them are, they just come in there with like one of those wooden swords and smack them in the behind. And there's the one where the thing flips and hits him in the crotch. That one was horrible to watch. So that was the last question, huh? The majority has decided that you're lying. The other knights beat their swords on the ground again. It was pretty intimidating. If Rudius hadn't spent the last month seeing their faces, he may have been freaked out. The Inquisition finds Rudius Greyrat guilty of heresy. No objection. No objection. No objection. No objection. Objection. I can't be here chin-wagging with you fellows when there's rice to be reaping. Hold it. Take that. No objections. No objections. No objections. Rudius got a good glare for piping up in the middle of all that. This concludes the Inquisition. I sentence the defendant to full disarmament. What's that? Some kind of death penalty? No, we won't kill you. Your arms will be cut off. Then, to ensure that you never will magic again, they will be wrapped in cloth woven with barrier magic, then sealed up with earth magic. That's... I guess? I mean, they get to talk about it a little bit later on, or at least Ch3 does, but it's like, are they sealing it away so that you can't put it back on and use lower tier healing magic to reconnect the limbs? Or is it an aspect that it prevents it from being regrown with healing magic? Because my assumption is, okay, yeah, you put it in the earth magic. He goes back to, Orsted and says, hey, Orsted, arm's gone. Can you heal it back? And then it just grows back with the healing magic. That's a curious question mark. Because I think if they were able to seal the arms and the arms could not be grown back with healing magic to restore it, that the sealing prevents that, that would be actually really, really a good way of keeping somebody from ever having their arms back. And this being the Mills Church with a lot of high-skilled healing users, I would assume that's probably the case, is that it prevents it from growing back. She actually answered, but Reese wasn't sure how they would do that when he was locked in a barrier. They probably had all kinds of stuff prepared for when the barrier came down and fighting started. Disarmament, though. Chopping off his arms and sealing them. No more magic, swords, arms, no funneling breasts either. I thought that would be the first thing that he would say. He's actually changed his priorities for once. He'd have to go back to his prosthesis. Therese, you'd take away my joy in life? Murder is joy in your life? That was what she thought of him? If he had both hands, he'd go off killing people? It was actually the opposite. He liked making people. What? No, I mean, without my hands, how am I supposed to hold my wife? Excuse me? I want to, hold my wife again. After being forced to repeat the same mortifying statement twice, all he got for it was an impatient click of the tongue from Therese. Rude. I want to be able to hold my wife. Gosh, stupid people in your marriages. Whatever. He wasn't keen on getting into a arrow-type dojin scene of showing her how it was done. He's like, yeah, come here. Let me show you how I hold my wife. No matter what happens, you guys don't plan on letting me go, do you? That's correct. So that joke of a trial wasn't you just messing around? It was a real deal? That's correct. The blessed child would be able to confirm my innocence, if you called her. Doesn't the blessed child usually attend inquisitions? Provided at least 7 are present, the Temple Knights have the authority to pass judgment on heretics and basic inquisitions. So you're not going to call the blessed child for me? That is correct. That's interesting. It is very interesting that they chose not to bring her. And I think I wonder if that's a sign that Therese doesn't trust her. I wonder if that's a sign that legitly she doesn't trust. Now, as we'll find out later on, we obviously see who gave the order, or at least that's what they say. Who gave the order to do this? And so it could just be that she was told to do that, and so she's just doing it by herself. We don't need the blessed child. But there is a side of me that wonders 2 things here. 1, that she knows that she likes Rudius and doesn't want to do that in front of her. Or 2, she doesn't trust the blessed child to make a correct judgment with him. I mean, let's assume this girl can probably lie. I'm sure everybody knows that she can probably lie if she wanted to. I think she's sort of been molded that way, but still. When Rudius said that, he couldn't see her face, but her voice shook slightly. So she wasn't doing this because she wanted to. She was an unwilling participant. It's her job. It's like it is one of those conflicts that she has. This is her duty. Was everything kind you did for me up until now an act to get me here? Of course not. The blessed child and I were very fond of you. You are the one who betrayed us, Rudius. I didn't betray anyone. I came here because I trusted you, Therese. Rudius then addressed the assembled knights. I only came here to befriend your beloved blessed child. No one replied, probably not interested in what Rudius had to say. This really sucks. He really tried to put everything out in the open this time. He controlled his impatience, kept his desires in check, opted for the slow but sure path to securing Zenith's return. And yet, here he was. I almost want to screenshot this moment right here for the later part. Because this idea of I finally tried to do something properly and not just let my emotions get over me and not just rush over here and grab the blessed child. No, I chose the path like what Cliff was telling me. Let's chill out and talk it through. Let's just talk it through. Everybody this entire time, people keep saying, talk it through. Rudius, chill, talk it through, talk it through. And so I don't really blame him for getting a little upset right here because things don't go well, he gets angry. Now, I would argue here, you have a setback. And with the abilities you have, you can keep pushing forward. It isn't like everything has failed, give up. And I think that is something that I think Rudius himself, I can see him having a habit of doing that, where just because of one setback, I'm going to say, I should have never done this. This was the wrong path. Everybody kept telling me this. They were all wrong. Look, guys, you were wrong because things aren't working out. Now, granted, for most individuals, right here is game over. A lot of other people don't have the option of being able to save their arms from being chopped off right here or going up against these Temple Knights. But for Rudius, this is a little setback. Therese, what's going to happen to Zenith? I'll make sure that Mother's persuaded. The matter at hand has no bearing on any of that. That was kind of a reassuring thing. I think right there I kind of had a reassurance against my theory that Therese was puppeteering a bunch of stuff. Now, granted, again, later on, that's pretty much clarified. I had a lot of weird, crazy theories last Mushoku Monday. I hope people enjoy that stuff. I enjoy doing that stuff, even though I'm mostly wrong. That answer, after that tremor in her voice earlier, Dries definitely wasn't calling shots here. Is it the Pope who was behind this? Or the Cardinal? That's the downside of being a servant to the church, huh? I know I'm not of the Mills faith, and I do have ties to the Pope, but you all knew that from the beginning, didn't you? Why now? Are you done asking questions? Her voice was cold. She wasn't going to answer. One last question. The tip-off you received wasn't from a god that came into your dreams with a message, was it? Here's interesting, very interesting part right here. No. A trusted source passed it on to me. The Temple Knights would never give credence to the words of an unknown entity like that, even if the god in your dream claimed to be St. Millis. God would never do such a thing. His words are not for our unworthy ears. Exactly. St. Millis would never appear to anyone other than the blessed child. That's an interesting note, especially with how against she was to this idea of a man god speaking to her. Not to say that I'm connecting St. Millis with man god, but it sort of falls in that same area of how would she possibly know if it was St. Millis? Millis is the one true god. Only a demon would use God's name falsely. Therese stood up straight and said proudly, Well spoken, all of you. Our faith is absolute, Rudius. Well, that's a relief. Yeah, so this is interesting. So this clarifies the idea that I was asking like 2 Mushoku Mondays ago. I was begging this question of like, would they have that separation? Do they have a concept where if something like a prophetic aspect, like if something, a burning bush or something happens, do they follow it? And some religions will have something in place where no, if it's not written here, it's a false prophet. And in a lot of cases, they'll just debate whether it's a false prophet or not. And yeah, in this situation, they're basically saying, now, granted, they never said anything to the effect of, if something comes to you calling themselves a man god, they're not really saying specifically that's the wrong thing. It's specifically Saint Millis, and that's it. Using Saint Millis' name specifically. And then they say God would never do such a thing of calling them Saint Millis. Again, these responses are specifically from the idea of somebody claiming to be Saint Millis specifically, not claiming to be a deity or anything like that, just Saint Millis. Now, they do say it is the one true God. There's only this one God, so that does technically go against that. But the thing that angers them here is specifically calling themselves Saint Millis. That's the no-go. That's where things stop. Very interesting. So a disciple of the man god wouldn't be amongst the band of fanatics. Yeah, well, now I'm gonna probably talk a little bit more of this later on. I don't specifically think this clears everybody here, because I think this is an aspect of publicly they will denounce even the idea of somebody accepting the word of the man god. Again, here it's specifically saying if the man god were to claim that he was Saint Millis, they would say no. But it's sort of implying here that if man god went to one of these people and said, you should go after Rudius, he's doing this, they're going to say, no, I will not listen to you. You have to be a demon. But their outburst is based on if the man god were to call himself Saint Millis. But still, either way, what Rudius is doing here is saying these people cannot be disciples of man god because none of them would believe them because they only follow Saint Millis. I don't think that's going to be true. I think that's going to be a public-facing thing. And it's going to get into my theories later on. One of my theories I have later on is this idea that I think in the end, what might be a part of this whole situation is that somebody followed the words of the man god, but they can't say because that would be heresy. You can't. So a disciple of the man god wouldn't be amongst this band of fanatics. They were all devout followers of Millis. That was all he needed to know to put his mind at ease. Rudius spread his arms, letting his robes fall on the ground. It made a sick swooshing sound that he was proud of. He's like, so cool. On his left hand was the gear that he kept for the moments like this. Arm, absorb. The stone of absorption activated, and the barrier faded. Really? I was very curious what Rudius was going to do to get out of this, and this is kind of a... I don't know. I can't follow this. I'm sorry. What they're implying here is that now, I think they specifically say he couldn't cast magics while inside of a barrier. But specifically, when he came up there, he was channeling mana to one of his hands. The barrier came up and it dispersed. So my idea here was that he can't collate his mana for a magic spell, or at least build it up to channel it to cast a spell because of the barrier. What does the stone absorption take? Mana. In order to activate the stone absorption, you have to put mana into it. and it produces, I think his earlier explanation is that it produces a spell to counter a spell, basically. Either way, it requires mana. The stone absorption requires mana to activate. Unless he's figured out some other way of using it that doesn't require mana to activate it, he's never implied any other way of activating it besides plugging mana into it. So when he got into that barrier, my question mark was like, what is he going to do to get out of this? Because he can't use magic. And now, yes, it could just be simply the barrier doesn't stop mana from going into things. It just prevents you from producing a spell from the mana. He said that he was going to use wind magic, and then later on it says the magic in his hand dispersed. So it could be that he was casting a wind magic spell, like it was producing into his hand, and the barrier itself, again, strictly just stops magic spells. So it could be that he's still able to channel mana, it's just that he can't produce a spell. And so the get around here is that all he's doing is putting mana into the stone absorption, and the stone absorption is not creating a spell. So I guess it does technically explain itself. All right, let's see what you got. All units spread out. The knights sprang away, putting distance between them. Rudius stepped aside, creating a stone cannon in both hands. Both hit hard and would be fatal. He first fired at Dustbin. 2 knights rushed up and deflected the stone cannons. Both carried beginner tier magic shields. Rudius was shocked that his stone cannon really got stopped by Novus magic. At Teresa's order, 3 coordinated magic strikes came at him from both sides. Fire, water, and earth disciplines, all at the same time. Arm, absorb. Their magic was disintegrated, and Rudius fired off stone cannons that were deflected again. Yeah, this is really interesting, because now we're kind of getting into how essentially the knights in Millis actually fight, which is going to be significantly different. The main difference here is they're employing barrier magic. That's a big thing, is they're employing barrier magic. And to use it on shields itself was the very fascinating thing that I found coming through here. But there was one oddity that I noticed going through this fight, is their incantations. The incantations are kind of weird. Let this smoldering flame burn bright with your blessings, flamethrower. Majestic blade of ice, I summon thee to strike my enemy down. Icicle blade. Then another barrage of magic came at Rudius. Not that one, by the way. Arm absorb. While the fire and water was disintegrated, the earth lance was overridden by Quagmire. He was too slow to get the counter off, though. Still, he simply stepped back to dodge out of the way of the magic attacks. Rudius was puzzled why there was only one attack, though, with 3 men being in that direction. Still, no time to think. He fired off another stone cannon. Despite making it faster this time, it was deflected by their shields. He had seen this before, water god style. That's the other thing. It's not just the barrier magic, because again, he said it's Novus magic. They got this barrier magic on those shields. That shouldn't stop. My stone cannons are insanely powerful. These aren't just your weak, typical stone cannons. These are built up, fast, and strong, and yet they're deflecting it. That's because they're employing water god style as well. So it's both technique and the fact that it has these barrier magics on them. So it's really cool. Impressive that even worked with magic shields. Now here it is. Here it is. This is very, very weird. Again, Temple Knights. St. Millis. They just got done talking about how you don't believe in any other gods except for St. Millis. Never use St. Millis' name separately. That is the one true God. Unknown God, answer my call and raise the earth up towards the heavens. Earthlance. Why would that not be seen as bad? Is it an aspect of worlds for thee and not for me kind of thing? Why would they cast a spell calling to an unknown god when St. Millis is their only god? Now, it could be simply an idea of this is a lost in translation issue, where St. Millis is called a different word like kami or something like this, and this is something else. But still, it is weird. And I was wondering when this was actually going to become an issue, because this is something that they would typically run into in the idea of believing in a god, that using somebody else's spells and stuff like that is technically using incantations that call upon different spirits and whatnot. This right here. O spirits of the magnificent waters, I beseech thee, the prince of thunder, with your majestic blade of ice, slay my enemy, icicle blast. They're calling upon spirits and gods that in a lot of religion would be seen as this bad. So it's very interesting. And again, it could be an aspect of them just not really seeing it as them actually calling to a god. They're just using the incantation. 2 more magic attacks came, one slightly slower than the other. He could counter both, but this wasn't going anywhere. Yeah, he's kind of stuck in something here. He's kind of stuck in a loop, which is really what they're kind of building. They're building up this kind of attack style that's really interesting. They had 2 groups of 3. 2 in each group were using barrier magic to block attacks. Since Rudius could only do 2 magic attacks at once, they only needed 2 shields. Whenever Rudius sent a magic attack, the 3rd member of the group would respawn with an attack. Whenever a group realized that they weren't being targeted, they'd drop their shields. Then when Ruius' defenses were open, all 3 attacked at once. They probably used 3 magic disciplines because they knew that Ruius can only use 2. Huh? What? Ruius can only use 2 disciplines? That must be a slip up of consistency or 7C's oopsies. No, he can use way more than just 2. But it seemed their info didn't include him being able to neutralize attacks simultaneously. It also seems that one member in each group without a shield was probably in charge of close range. So as long as Ruius was in a safe zone, they wouldn't move. They probably thought this thoroughly through. Fireball. Ruius shifted tactics, firing off a fireball, making sure that all heard it. I was already kind of wondering right here, why does he keep calling out things? Typically he calls out things when he's with a party because he's trying to notify people around him that he's going to attack. It's so that people can get out of the way, so they know when it's coming. But when you're fighting enemies, you shouldn't really be telling them, especially things like yelling out Disturb Magic that he does in a minute. It's like, why would you tell them what you're doing? Ruius shifted tactics, firing off a fireball, making sure they all heard it. Now here, yes, there's a tactic. He created 2 burning orbs, each 2 meters across. Their size and temperature were advanced level, but they were slower than his stone cannon. High arc, very slow speed, 1 for each group. The shield-bearing knights moved in front again, but the magic shield had a weak point. Disturb Magic. Again, why would you call out Disturb Magic? It could be a habit thing. At least with Disturb Magic specifically, I would never call that out. If I was Ruius, I would never basically voice that you know how to disturb magic. Let it be a question mark of what the hell he just did, or simply that something else is affecting them. But saying specifically you are the one that's disturbing their magic, it kind of reveals your cards. Again, Disturb Magic's supposed to be like an oddity. Like, wow, you can actually do that? The spell wiped out both shields on the left. Almost all barrier magic eats up magic energy, so long as they stay active. Even a beginner tier magic barrier. What that meant here was that Disturb Magic still worked, even though the incantation was finished. That's an important thing to note. I mean, I would assume that, but it was important to note. The group on the right would block it, but divide and conquer. However, something came after Ruius from behind, rolling around with his right hand raised to block it. There was a loud thud, before something exploded into dust in front of him. A brown boulder reduced to fragments and flew past his face. He could still feel the force of the impact in his elbow. It was a stone cannon. To think that it was the first time he had it used against him. He's like, man, I use this on everybody, and this is the first time it's been used on me. Yeah, now that I think about it, thinking back, yeah. I don't recall any other time that he's ever actually had it used against him. Ruius can cast different spells with each hand. So long as the 2 of you counter him and 1 attacks, we'll be fine. Every one of you, stand your ground. Ch3 had snuck up behind him, along with a knight that had casted the spell. He was surrounded. That's a very interesting strategy, and it's actually curious that Ruius didn't notice them, and that's part of their plan. Just keep pressure on him from these 2 groups, shielding and attacking. With the 2 groups, they can go simultaneously, and then at the same time, while he's too busy with the 2 of them, walk right around. Or she knows teleportation magic. It's a joke. Maybe moving back at the start was a mistake, but he assumed they'd planned for close range too. The armor of the knights that he had hit with a fireball were smoking a bit, but they were otherwise unharmed. Ruius, the 8 of us are the strongest of the Temple Knights. You can't win. You think so, do you? Over the past 10 days, we took the liberty of studying how you fight. You're so famous, it didn't take long to put together a strategy. 10 days, huh? 10 days, huh? 10 days, huh? I mean, that does technically line up, but man, that begs a lot of question marks as everything's been going on for the last 10 days. Because, yes, within a day or so, Zenith was caught. It was literally like the next day that she went out for the walk with Geese, got captured. And then over those next 2 weeks, he's been visiting with the Blessed Child and Therese and having Geese and Aisha do a lot of research. That entire time, at least at some point about 4 days later after Zenith was captured, 4 days later probably, that's the point in which we will find out Therese makes the choice that this is something that she's going to do. And then she spends the next 10 days hanging out with Ruius, tell him about how, yeah, I'm contacting Dad. I got the brother and sister, they're coming. We're going to get this figured out. Don't worry. I'm going to get this figured out. All the while, they're with him and the Blessed Child. Now, granted, it could have only been here recently that she was told to do this, but the entire time that she was with Ruius, she was thinking up counter strategies in case he did something. That this is not so much that she was given that order to take down Ruius and she's been hanging out with him the whole time, but more so because she is a Temple Knight defending a Blessed Child, she is always coming up with strategies for people that are around the blessed child. And because Rudius is hanging out around the blessed child, she's thinking of if he did something, I need a counter strategy for him. Not so much, I was told that he is currently trying to kidnap her, and she's letting the blessed child be around him. It can work both ways. If that was the case, they'd have their swords out, as he was weaker closer range. Right now, they were evading all of his magic. He had plenty of tricks left up his sleeve. I wonder what that's the case. Why would they not go physical with him? Is because their strategy realized that they can't get up there and close to him, like he's going to be able to evade them? Or could it be an aspect they're choosing not to draw their swords because she doesn't want to hurt him? And if they were to draw their swords, they could mess him up. They could possibly kill him. It was possible they hadn't braved close combat because they were wary of what he'd do. Yeah, that could be a thing too. They don't have enough information about him close range. Given how they shut him out, it did look like their strategy was working for them. If they had to resort to a war of attrition, they had failed in their research. It's like, yeah, you don't know how much mana I have, do you? They must have a plan. So he had to act quick. Please, Rudius, give yourself up. Before you try anything, we know your favorite magic, and we have a plan to shut you down. I wasn't expecting that device in your left hand, but I know how it works. Oh? The entrance to the garden is sealed with barrier magic. No one was coming to help you. Kudos to them. Their plan was pretty perfect. They had worked out a strategy to catch him. No heat of the moment counter plan was going to break through that. It was thorough. He wondered if he should try a few different approaches to see what would break free. But if it got him captured, it would be bad. He couldn't afford to pull his punches anymore. Quagmire. It was time to get serious. Rudius gets serious. We then jump to Teresa's perspective. Yay! Get a Teresa perspective. Very brief, but it does alleviate a lot of my concerns in this very brief moment. After Rudius mutters something, the ground beneath Therese turned to mud. Her informant had told her of this spell. This is why they called him Rudius Quagmire Grey Rat. The swamp spell created should only be the size of a dinner plate. As was expected from Quagmire, however, this one was much bigger. Every visible inch of the garden turned into a muddy bog. There was a nasty squelching sound as the blessed child treasured saurak trees, the balta trees, and the perish trees, all listed sideways. The Quagmire wasn't going to hold them back. Trash was already casting a counterspell. That's interesting because I don't think they've ever really kind of stated that Quagmire is that way. I know that Quagmire's typically not that big, at least from like early examples of Quagmire, it was pretty small, but they never imply the idea that typically it's the size of a dinner plate, just big enough to capture a person's foot. And that was technically how it was early on when Rudius was first using it on Paul. He was like he was just basically grabbing Paul's foot or whatever. And yes, it technically makes sense because in most cases they're probably not going to pump too much mana into it, otherwise they're going to drain themselves, where Rudius doesn't have to worry about that. So it's interesting. Deep mist. Suddenly everything obscured in a white mist. Crap. Everyone on your guard. He wants us stuck in the mud and lost in the mist so he can pick us off one by one. The next instant, the ground glowed purple. Know what that is? Followed by a sharp crackle, like something splitting apart. Teresa's ears rang. No one panic. The enchantment on your armor makes you immune to electric. That's interesting. I think they've implied before that electric's kind of a it's kind of a new thing? Question mark. When Rudius learned king tier magic, he basically compressed it into an idea of solely focusing on creating the electrical current. So it's not as if there is an element of electric. Is that he is taking one spell and altering it in a way to produce the electric spell. And so whenever Rudius has used electric, it's very shocking to people. Like it's an oddity. What the heck, you did that? So it's odd that you would, okay, yes, I would assume that they could learn that he does have an electric magic, but it's more interesting that there is an enchantment that counters that, as if there is a common necessity for the immunity of electric. Like, electric is a common thing in this world, and so, yeah, of course we have plenty of armors that have, or plenty of enchantments to protect against electric. That's a very odd one. It makes me wonder if there is, I guess, a necessity for it somewhere, that they would need it. This guy is slippery. Don't give him any opportunity to escape. Understood, Captain. Everything was going to be fine, Therese thought. Her informant told her that Rudius was no good in close range. He did, however, have spells like electric and stone cannon and others to watch out for. All of his magic was powerful to boot. She didn't want to be on the receiving end of a direct hit. Unfortunately for Rudius, every knight in the Keepers of Anastasia was a warrior priest of the highest caliber. At minimum, they were advanced level, trained in barrier magic, advanced in 4 other disciplines. Any of them were formidable opponents alone, but trained to take enemies as a team. Teresa's water god style was only intermediate, but Funeral next to her was a water saint. Rudius might be an inferior tier magician, but he wouldn't find it easy to get through. Her strategy was sound. Yeah, that was interesting. When I was reading the first part of this, I'm like, okay, well, they're very much so like jack of all trades. And in a situation where they're perfect as a team, it makes sense how good they are. And we've kind of mentioned before, as the higher the tier gets, just using more magic. But I always felt like the fighting styles, as it gets higher, makes them much more powerful. Magic, it just takes more mana and makes larger area effects. Whereas, like, fighters, they become almost godlike. Like, they're so fast and their attacks are insanely powerful. So I guess it makes sense that because they're, even if they are in advanced tier, because they have all the disciplines, because they're working as a team, it is formidable. But I was kind of expecting them to be higher in their actual sword styles, which here it only seems to imply that one of them is Saint tier. These are supposed to, again, be the best of the best to protect something that should never come to harm. We're going to counter Quagmire, Captain. The mud beneath them turned to sand. Therese yanked her feet out of the ground to avoid getting buried. She figured Rudius hadn't thought of Sandwave being a counter for Quagmire. Countering magic was still an ongoing topic of research. He probably never had his Quagmire countered before. It was checkmate. Yeah, this is interesting right here to kind of note this idea of them, obviously are constantly figuring out ways to counter other magic, because magic themselves are, it's kind of pointing the idea that the Mills Church doesn't like the University of Magic and that region and whatnot. And almost kind of painted it as them not liking the use of magic itself. But they are utilizing the magic, and they're obviously seeing it as a threat, so they are learning ways to counter it. So it kind of shows that evolution of, I guess, their way of thinking, in a sense, or at least the evolution in what we see the Mills Church as believing in magic. But still, kind of puffing herself up a little bit there too much. Like the idea of, we researched a lot about him, and we figured out ways to counter his spells, because he's probably never been countered before, which is an obvious conclusion to come to. That because Rudius uses it so much, it's probably an assumption that he uses a lot because it barely ever gets countered. Or simply because, I mean, she points out the idea that he probably never learned about counters in his studying in University of Magic. So this idea of possibly looking into what they get into, and obviously not teaching those ways of countering, which technically goes to the credit of the school itself, because they kind of put it in this way of, like, you know, physical swordsmanship and whatnot is sort of seen as superior. And in their belief, magic is used for more things than just fighting. So it's not simply that they're teaching in the University of Magic to fight with magic. They're teaching to utilize it to benefit themselves. And from the perspective of a Temple Knight, they're going to be looking for ways to fight. Use the magic to fight. None of them really believe that Rudius was going to try to kidnap the Blessed Child, of course. There's that sign of, this isn't really her decision. Her hand is being forced. He really made her smile, and Therese knew that he only came here because he was scared for Zenith. Unfortunately, Therese had her hands tied. This was the order from the Cardinal, so the truth didn't come into it. She simply obeyed. Bummer. Again, here's that solidification that the reason why she's doing what she's doing is because the Cardinal sent. So this at least washes Therese's hands. We can go back to seeing Therese as best aunt, even though she's doing this. But again, she's being forced to. It's a very tough conundrum to get into, the idea of duty versus family. Because essentially what she's doing is she's having to attack and mutilate, seemingly permanently mutilate her nephew. Now, she does point out later on, she's doing this with the assumption, she has this assumption to clear her mind that Rudius can probably restore his arms. He can probably figure out a way to get him back. So it's fine. But still, it's bad. Even if the assumption is that he will go get them cured immediately, it's fine. He needs to take this punishment because this has to be done. But I'm going to relieve my consciousness by saying he'll just walk out the front gates, run into the Dragon God Orsted, and the Dragon God Orsted will figure it out. He'll restore his arms. He's going to get his arm back. It's okay. But you're still going to chop his arms off. It sounds painful. Unless they have some really cool way of doing it without it being hurting too much. No matter what, it's still like betrayal. And again, she's pointing at herself. We know that you weren't doing this. We know that you're a good person. I know that you were just afraid for your mother, but I have to obey and I'm going to cut your arms off. It's still super bad. Like, it still hurts. Like, this is horrible to think about. That she would follow her duty and do this and betray her nephew. All because the Cardinal said so. It sucks. I'm sorry, it sucks. Truthfully, Dust did get a bit huffy, saying he knew Rudius was in love with the Blessed Child. See, that's why he wants him dead. He's in love with her. Get him. We're gonna get him. He's down. Kill him. Rudius would remember that. Therese argued to spare his life at least, and it worked. The cardinal generously decreed that as an enemy of Lord Millis, losing his arms would suffice as punishment. That's why they brought no blades or poison. Again, I think things would be significantly different if they had. It would be okay, she thought. Rudius was so young, and yet already had a beautiful wife. Even without his arms, he'd be able to live his life with Lady Edis' support. Right here, she's even taken the idea that it's a possibility he won't be able to get him back. This sort of makes it worse. I believe he didn't do it. We believe he wasn't gonna do it. But I gotta do this. And he'll be fine without his arms. But now she's saying right here to relieve herself, she heard that Rudius served the dragon god too. When Ch3 was a child, she heard that dragons had mysterious powers. So perhaps they could break the seal and reattach his arms. As long as they didn't hear about it, she promised they wouldn't bother him. She has no clue. He serves the dragon god. She heard that dragons, I wonder if that's supposed to be dragon folk. She's pointing out dragons, like the beast dragons, use mysterious powers, which I would assume is probably gravity magic, because gravity is kind of something that has never been really talked about except for those dragons in the mountains and Oldius. So she doesn't even know that Orsted knows all abilities and knows really high healing magic. She's doing all this with the assumption that he won't get his arms back. This is making it worse. The more I think about this, the more I'm not sympathizing with Ch3. This is super bad, which is interesting to really think about, truly, considering what happens later on with the meeting. As for Zenith, Ch3 would make sure that worked out. Like she said, this had no bearing on that. At least she's looking after the wishes of what Rudius wants, despite the fact that she's literally betraying him right here. Funeral called out from the deep mist, snapping Ch3 back to reality. Then all of a sudden, she got a strange feeling. Something was wrong. Rudius wasn't doing anything. After casting deep mist, he hadn't moved an inch. If he ran or used magic, she would have heard something. Deep in the mist, where she couldn't even see a meter in front of her face, she didn't hear anything. Not since the first electric. After a wind blast went off, the mist dispersed, leaving them shocked. What they saw standing in the middle of their ring wasn't Rudius. The thing, whatever it was, stood atop a torn scroll, big and made of rock. A figurine, a set of armor. An idea suddenly occurred to her as she murmured, "Was that summoning magic?" The next moment, the giant suit of armor moved with terrifying, unbelievable speed. He had to use his trump card. Rudius, you had to use your trump card. Now, it does imply later on that it's mainly because he's holding back. Like, he's forcing himself not to kill them, and he probably could have handled it really easily without the armor if he just didn't hold himself back. But if that's the case, then summoning the armor, I guess, could be a defense tactic more than an offensive tactic. I don't know. I guess the speed helps him kind of get around their defenses so that he doesn't have to use lethal to get around the defenses. But no, this whole segment, again, the first time I read it, I'm like, okay, good. She's a good girl. Ch3 is a good girl. She's not really fully betrayed him yet. But it's like, now that I read it a second time, I'm like, yeah, no, actually, she sort of is if you think about it. Again, it is forced hand. She has to do this, otherwise she would probably be thrown to the... trying to think of a YouTube-friendly way of saying it. Her being inquisitioned, but it's like she's doing it fully knowing that she's going to take something from him. Take something very valuable, which is his arms. He won't be able to fight or do anything ever again in the future. He's just going to be an armless person, living the rest of his life with his wife. And I guess from her perspective, she's thinking, well, you have a wife. You have a loved one that will take care of you. You'll be happy for the rest of your life. Unlike me, who would never have a husband. It sucks. I still love Ch3, but still, it kind of sucks. It does. Anyways, Rudius' perspective. Rudius walloped Dusk's gang first. He closed in on them the moment the mist cleared. They were too surprised to react in time. Using his eye of foresight, he read the positions of their shields and where they would move, while firing off shots. They may have tried to defend themselves, but all of his shots blasted through. He held back, obviously, only to knock them out. They were alive, probably. He didn't wait for them to hit the ground, but rather went into Gatling mode. He spun around, arms spinning with him. There was a buzzing like angry bees as a line of stone cannons strafed out. The knight's legs snapped like twigs, armor and all. They were still attached, and he hadn't hit vital spots, so they were probably not dead. Probably. This is kind of an interesting thing, because typically whenever I think of stone cannon, I think of like in the anime and stuff like these little drills, but it kind of is more putting it in this segment as them be like boulders. So he's like hitting them with a boulder in the forehead or whatever, rather than a drill that would, I don't know how that wouldn't be lethal. It would go through the head. These boulders are hitting their legs or whatever, or rocks are hitting their legs, and it's snapping their legs and whatnot. And he's avoiding vital spots, and it's like, it's kind of hard not to hit vital spots and legs. So I guess it's good to note that they're probably not dead. As long as they're, if it didn't pierce the skin and hit arteries, or as long as the bones didn't snap and hit arteries, yeah, they're fine. To make sure they didn't get up, he tapped each in the head with a stone cannon to knock them out, using the footwork Orsted taught him, allowing him to get close to his attackers from behind, while maintaining the ability to dodge. It didn't seem like anyone was attacking him just then, but it was better safe than sorry. He stopped in front of Therese, who stared back at him with a blank shock. Another knight tried to draw his sword to defend her, but he was too slow. Edis could have cut him in pieces 10 times over that time. In version 1, Ruiz could deal with that. His fist whammed into the knight before he drew his blade. The last knight didn't have time to speak before being sent flying. He crashed into the wall of the church and passed out. Therese remained dazed throughout it all. Ruiz couldn't see her face through the helmet, but he recognized her body language. People panicked and freezed up like that when they couldn't process what was happening anymore. Yeah, nothing's going as planned. She's like, I got a thorough plan. Everything's perfect. He's done for. He's got to accept his fate. And then suddenly, nope, what's this thing? It's a big boulder running around and firing at everything. But yeah, interesting that one of them actually still takes a swing. What the? Ruiz knocked her out. As a gesture of respect for what she had done for him, he did it with stone cannon rather than a fist. It was over. Magic Armor version 1 was a serious force to be reckoned with. All the attacks had cut through their defenses, and he'd barely taken a single hit. Fighting like this almost felt kind of unsporting. Thankfully, they weren't dead. He didn't like killing people when he could avoid it. Again, another sign since the whole thing with Chiron that he's technically not wanting to take lives just like that. Unless they were disciples of the man god. That was his rule. Besides, they were never much of a threat. Whew, that feels better. Amazing how good it felt to vent some frustration he had built up lately. Like everything around like Claire and everything is like, yeah, damn, it felt good. Maybe it was good for him to get a real fight every now and then. He wondered if he should take a leaf out of Edis's book, and never mind. That'd be too much violence. Now, what to do? After this, he and the Temple Knights were definitely enemies. Who ratted him out? The list of people were Geese, Aisha, Cliff, and the Pope. Maybe the girl at Cliff's place as well? Aisha was ruled out right away. If she wanted to betray him, she could have hit him closer to home. Say, big brother, piggyback, all cute, and while distracted by her breast pressing on his back, she'd slit his throat. Easier, she could just poison his drink. Maria's pretty sure that Geese and Cliff were safe too. Okay. He categorized them together. Neither of them needed a big, complicated plan to get the better of Rudius. That left the Pope. But why the Pope would pick this moment to get rid of him? What was in it for him? No, Rudius was looking at it the wrong way. Maybe he wanted to pin him up against the Temple Knights. Rudius said that he would support the Pope, but didn't follow through. Maybe he plotted this because he was sick of Rudius popping in all the time. Then, while Teresa's guards were out and occupied, the Pope's people would snatch up the blessed child. But Teresa said that her information came from a trustworthy source. The Pope was her enemy, definitely not a trustworthy source. The kidnapping line may have been a coincidence, a lie someone made up to pin it on him. No, it wasn't coincidence. This could be the man god's plot. His disciples could be lurking somewhere in the shadows. Yeah, that was more straightforward explanation than betrayal, and it was more likely. Rudius didn't know what his angle was, and anyway, it'd be based on whatever the man god sees in the future. The bastard had his tentacles in every nasty thing that ever happened. Pretty much. Just pretty much. Rudius couldn't pin down the culprit with only information that he had. He was wasting his time overthinking it. Yeah, the thought here at this point was mostly the Pope through the Cardinal. Like the Pope told the Cardinal and the Cardinal sent. Because we already know, based on Teresa's perspective, it was the Cardinal that made the call. But who told the Cardinal is a question mark. And that could either be Geese or the Pope. And I was kind of starting to lean towards Pope. My mind was going towards the Pope with me now taking into account the idea that Geese is not working for the man god yet. That whole bar scene was later. And yeah, it kind of leaves this whole situation with Zenith and Claire sort of a separate ordeal. Rudius couldn't pin down the culprit with only the information he had. He was just wasting time overthinking it. For now, he had more immediate problem. He was accumulating enemies. Yeah, we have a problem that I have 4 stars right now. I gotta get out of here. He didn't know if anything had happened to the blessed child, but he had really done a number on the guards. The Cardinalist faction wasn't going to like it. First, they'd arrest him for attempting to kidnap the blessed child. Then they'd follow the trail of breadcrumbs to get Cliff, who brought him here. Then the Pope. Did that mean the Pope hadn't orchestrated this? Was it the Cardinal? Yeah, this does kind of give a little bit of clearance to the Pope right here. Because, in that process of thought, this is going to come back to the Pope because Cliff brought him here and Cliff is connected to the Pope. So it's a triggering effect here. But that is also assuming that Rudius will fail in this fight. And I think the Pope could have been wagering for that. Again, he'd have to stop worrying over who was behind it and move to the next move. But what was that? But against what? Who? Part of him wanted to pack up and get the hell out of the city. But he has Zenith to consider. He couldn't leave her behind. Yeah, that's sort of the thing that's kind of tacking him down. Is like, I can just totally wipe my hands of this right now and let's just go. Damn it, no, I can't. I don't have Zenith. He couldn't leave her behind. He could go to Latria's estate now and bust her out. But what if she wasn't there? Yeah, that's another thought there. It's was my thought early on, and it kind of sucks that he's left so much time for her to be moved. But what if she wasn't there? What if, while he was working with Therese, Claire had moved Zenith to another location? Was he going to end up having to burn down all of Millis, fighting these knights? Oh, the man god would love that. Yeah. But what the hell? Maybe he should do it anyways. First order of business was to get Aisha, Geese, and Cliff out of harm's way. Then go to Latria's estate and retrieve Zenith. If she wasn't there, he'd head for the castle and grab a royal family member. Let's make it worse, right? Demand an exchange of hostages. Finally, he had the plan. He was tired of thinking about it. It keeps going down. Let's just get a hostage in exchange. They won't chase me down back to my hometown, will they? They won't burn Aisha and Zenobia and everybody alive down there, and Julie. Oh, Reese looked over to a voice, past the mess Quagmire had made, and to the door of the inner sanctum. There stood a girl holding a special key that operated its lock. She was alone, and Maurice realized as she was looking into his eyes. Oops! He immediately tried to avert his gaze, but it was too late. A look of perfect understanding washed over her face, and she smiled. Then she held out her arms, as if she welcomed him. When he saw it, it clicked. Maybe it was just instinct, but he acted on it. He kidnapped the blessed child. She's just like, all right. Just like I said, I called that one. I mean, it wasn't a tough call, honestly. I think that was kind of telegraphed there. This idea that I think that the moment that she knew that he needed to kidnap her, she's going to be like, yeah, sure, whatever. Let's do it. Again, it does add a little additional thing to it, which I'm very curious about, the way that's worded. But it all kind of makes sense. This idea that, Edis has saved him. And again, there is a side of me that almost wonders if the blessed child has ever looked upon the eyes of Orsted and knows how often she dies so early in her life, and that somehow, because Edis was there, she changed everything, allowed her to live longer and experience all the stuff that she's experiencing now. Being able to go out into the garden and hang out there. This is stuff that she never got to do previously because she died when she was very young. So I kind of figured that no matter how it kind of plays out, this is something that she's going to accept. Unless, again, she's seen something else. There's something else that she's seen. Chapter 4, Hardball Negotiations. There's an old saying, when you swallow poison, don't forget the plate. Meaning, if you're poisoned, you might as well eat the plate that came with it. Everything was a gift. Well, that was bullshit. It actually means that if you're going to die anyways, get a little adventurous. You don't usually eat plates after all. Whether the poison or the porcelain kills you, same difference. Live a little. Yeah, that was made up too, obviously. Anyhow, Reese was in the mercenary office, underneath a closed-down bar. Reese was surrounded by barrels of preserved food and rows of black coats. The teleportation scroll brought him here. The way that he made it sound like is he had this scroll that was really big, and that on the other side of the scroll, his armor was sitting atop the magic circle. So that when he put out the scroll and used it, it would activate the process of teleportation, and since the armor was already on the other side, it would automatically swap it. But then the text would disappear immediately. That was the whole idea of sending the blessed child. So it's kind of curious why, I'm guessing he has two set up, because that doesn't make any sense. Unless he has one scroll that will activate and then it moves over the armor that's already on there, and then he's keeping another scroll that he'll roll out and activate, and then it'll take him to the scroll, the other location. But no, that can't be it either, because again, the teleportation scroll gets used up. Unless he's setting up an actual etched-in teleportation circle on the other side, which he doesn't know how to do. He had to have Orsted do that. He probably has two sets of scrolls, I'm guessing. One for bringing his armor, and then one for getting him out of there, an escape route. And that he's not using the same one for both situations, which again makes sense because he's talking about, using a scroll to escape. So it's a bit odd, but I guess it makes sense that he's always carrying around two. He may have said that and I'm forgetting. The teleportation scroll brought them there. Sitting in front of him was a woman. She always put on a cutesy little girl act, but in reality, she was probably over 20 years old. This place has a lot of character, doesn't it? She sat with her knees bent and her feet at her sides, right down on the dusty floor, even though he hadn't bound her feet or her hands or anything. What were you thinking? Whatever do you mean? Appearing at that crucial moment, not even trying to run away? Her entrance to the scene of the fight was perfect. It was like she had been lying in wait, so that she could politely cooperate with the kidnapping. I happened to step out then, that's all. No one told me about that terrible fight. When I came out, everything was all covered in mist. It gave me quite a scare. You're lying. Oh yes, this is the truth. I looked into the memories of one of my minders and learned what Therese and the others were going to do to you. That's why I came outside. Huh? You were coming to rescue me? That's right. Then when I came out and looked into your eyes, I knew everything that happened right away. The moment she made eye contact with anyone, she could see their memories. It was impressive that she had found her eyes through that magic armor, but that might be part of the power. It wasn't like Rudeus understood Zenoba's uncanny ability either. Yeah, that right there is actually a very good point. Depending on how much of his armor actually covers up his face, which I think the previous pictures that we've seen, I don't know if he's altered it in any way, but that is a good point that technically, did she really see something? Did she know what really happened? Or is she just saying that, saying, yeah, you're safe because I've seen what all transpired and you're a good person or whatever? I think she's lying right there. I don't think that she actually seen it because it just implies too often that people look away. And thus, it does seem like direct eye contact is kind of necessary. Or it could be one of those things where it's still kind of left vague. Maybe she makes it seem like she has to do that, so that people always believe that she has to do that. That allows her to be able to see things even when people are looking away. Like, I want to make everybody believe that I have to see them directly in their eyes. That way, they'll never know that I actually see what I see. I am on your side. I want to help you. Reese didn't reply. Just point a finger at her. When you swallowed poison, don't forget the plate. He'd already kidnapped her, so he was already screwed. No more plans. They're doing this. He had 2 cards left to play, and imagine the worst case scenario. The Pope, the Cardinals, Therese, and Claire were all Reese's enemies. Working as agents of the man god, they had already taken Cliff, Aisha, and Geese as prisoner. In the hour or so since he took the blessed child, the temple knights were moving. His assumption that no one's seen him teleport was wrong. Someone had seen him, and the temple knights were heading there now. He hadn't had time to set up a teleportation circle for the magic armor version 1, so he cast Quagmire to bury it in the garden for the time being, but the temple knights had already dug it out and carried it away. Set up another one right there. So he's just making them. Like, he's just constantly making more teleportation circles, or he's just got a whole bunch of them. Like, he's got to have a whole bunch of them, because, again, it hasn't implied that he knows how to make teleportation circles, but he has a bunch of scrolls that Orsted has made him. So he's just kind of throwing out, like, scrolls after scrolls after scrolls. I guess I'm missing how many of these he has. He has said they're big. Now, it is kind of odd that he didn't just transport with the magic armor. That's an oddity there as well. I guess maybe because it wouldn't fit down in the basement where they teleported to. But no, that's where it came from. That's it, presumably where it came from. That would be as bad as it can get. Bad enough that if things turned out that way, he'd be screwed. He had to find a way out of it with just his 2 cards. His own fighting abilities and the Blessed Child. Blessed Child, before I trust you, I have some questions. Naturally, if he was going to make this work, he needed to question the Blessed Child. He could decide whether or not he could rely on her later. Right now, he needed information. What is your power as a Blessed Child? Don't you know already? I want to hear it from you. Reese was curious if she would say something different than what Orsted did. I can see the surface of people's memories. The surface? Yes. Things that are on their mind. And the associated memories. Only a little, though. What's the difference between that and reading minds? The difference is that I can only see the past. Though if I maintain eye contact, I can go back as far as memories extend. That's interesting. Things that are on their mind and associated memories. So it's almost implying this idea of now and back, but not necessarily in progress. That's the weird thing. Because it keeps saying, so you can't read minds. Not really. I can only see the past. And I can go deep as I keep that eye contact. So it's almost like if I was standing before her and I was thinking to myself, man, she chunky. She's a chunker. If time progresses, she would see in my memories, I thought of that. That's sort of what it seems like it's implying. But that could also not be thought processes, but more actions and whatnot. Memories themselves of actions. It's interesting. That's, I was a side of me that's like, I kind of want to dig into the original text of Japanese and see if I can find an alternate translation for this whole segment. Because I think it almost feels like this is kind of a complicated way of sort of describing this, that it could be interpreted a different way. But it's probably one of those cases where I'll probably learn more later on. Don't dig into it too much a moment. I usually typically do that. Whenever I think that something might be translated wrong, I'm like, just wait. It might just be vague for a reason. Digging into it too much, you might see too much. So it's less that she sees into their memories than that she sees bits of their past that relate to whatever they're thinking about. I didn't really get that too much, but I guess it technically makes sense. Again, connecting it to the current moment and seeing deeper. You only see it? That's correct. Say a person lost their mind. Could you bring them back to themselves? No. I imagine it could be possible if I used my powers in conjunction with healing magic, though. Rudeus responds in his mind, so he can't bring Zenith's memories back. Dude, there's a chance. Rudeus, shut up. I read this, I'm going, so you're saying there's a chance. That's all I need. She's like, okay, technically what they're implying here is, again, she can see something in their mind. She can see their thought process. And again, I was saying that's enough for me. I would love the idea of just being able to see if something's in there. If there's just possibly a break in how they communicate that stuff. And again, if regular checks are made, see if there's a progression, a change, and a recovery. But she is kind of taking and going, yeah, I can't bring those memories back into them. I can't fix that. I can't rearrange things in there or whatever. I can't fix them to bring themselves back. But she says, I imagine it could be possible if I use my powers in conjunction with healing magic, though. What does that mean? What does that mean? It could be simply the idea that she could read in their memories and possibly find where the break is, and then healing magic could be used in conjunction with it to fix what is breaking. But there's another side of me that wonders if she's implying, hey, what are the chances that possibly somebody using healing power through me, I can fix something in there? I don't know what she's implying here. And it could just be that she's saying, I don't know, it's possible. I mean, could Traba try something? I don't know. We could try something. You want to try something? Which, yes, I'm always for. Like the idea of, okay, cool. But she doesn't know. And that's probably why Reese is not letting himself get caught up in it. He's like, no, so she can't bring him back. She doesn't know. She just literally say, I imagine it's possible. She doesn't know. So don't get your hopes up. So I guess it's good for him. Meaning, you can't actually read minds. No, but I can use what I see to guess. That's another weird statement. That she can guess based on their train of thought, I guess. Looking in the past memories or whatever, she'll see their train of thought and can guess where they're going with it. She couldn't see what Rudius was thinking now. But it was impossible to carry on a conversation while constantly thinking about something else. So if someone asked what you had for breakfast, you're not going to have scientific musing about how the sky was blue. Again, I guess it's a process. You're thinking through the process, and that stuff gets set to memories, and then she can see that stuff. I see why no one with a guilty conscience wants to meet your eyes. She was a lie detector. All she had to say was that your eyes met, and that was enough to establish guilt. There was no way to tell if she herself was lying, but he guessed that nobody watches the Watchmen. She could condemn anyone she didn't like. That was how it worked for the Blessed Child. You only had to look at Zenova to see how that kind of power made you an asset, as well as an incredible threat. So long as someone with power backed you up, you'd be safe. Yeah, that kind of gets in that whole thing that was happening with the Library Labyrinth, with the look into the Blessed Children and whatnot of the past. There was like that whole study book on it, which, again, I would kind of assume is light novel original, because I think people were saying the Library Labyrinth was not in the web novel, unless they brought up that book specifically somewhere else. But it was kind of an interesting look in the idea of how a lot of the Blessed Childs were feared. And then there was that one that could erase the Blessed Child's power. And you can kind of see how that's kind of dangerous, even though I was arguing at the time, how would you know? They got rid of this person. How do you know that he exists? Unless they used it once before. You aren't averting your eyes, Sir Ridius. I guess my conscience is clean. He kept his eyes on hers for a while now. Part of it was that he just didn't give a damn anymore. But also, if she could see the past, maintaining eye contact would save him time explaining. That's true. But I was already saying right here, like, how far is she going? And I guess it would take her a little bit longer in order to get to where she would need to go. I was already assuming right here, is she going to get to the part where she knows that he's from another world? How mind-boggling that would be for her. Like, how absolutely mind-boggling it would be for her to go all the way into his past, get all the way to the point where he's infinite, and suddenly, what the hell is this place that I'm in? What the hell am I seeing? I wonder if she got there and she didn't say anything. Perhaps not. But are you sure you don't mind me knowing everything else? Goodness, Sir Orsted has a curse like that. Ah, the man god. Their first words were, oh dear. Okay, I'm assuming this is all in order of going backwards. So we got to the part where, I don't know, Cliff is being brought to Orsted, and they're trying to figure out the curse and trying to get rid of it. And so she learns about that. Orsted has a curse like that. He told Blessed Child this already. He told her, you know, if you ever run into if you ever want to repay us, if you ever meet Orsted, don't hate him. He has a curse like that. So she knows about that. Then it has to go way back. It has to go way back. Now, it could be her saying, oh, the man god, as in, like, you know, you're talking about him, but I would assume this is probably going to be, at some point, she looks into his past and sees where he met the man god, which the last time he met with the man god would have been before he went off to fight Orsted. That's way back there. Then it goes back further, and she says, their first words were, I'm going to assume this is the Lucy, or probably Lucy. She says there. So she's just probably talking about a child, and their first words were this. And then, oh dear. The blessed child's face suddenly turned red. Did she see something dirty? He figured that she'd seen stuff like that during Inquisitions. 2 at once. Dear me. 2, yet still love. Oh, an altar. Oh, wait. Oh, she must have seen something she shouldn't have. What did you see? Here's... I see those not of the Mill's faith have rather extreme, that is to say, different rituals to ours. You just saw the core of my soul. I see. She flattened the hem of her skirt and drew back from him a little. She's like, don't take my underwear. She's like, don't take my underwear. Oh, man. She could relax. Maybe the Roxy faith wasn't as pure as hers here in Millis. But it's still a pretty nice shade of blue. He's in a Pantsu. Rudius, you looking at her Pantsu? What the heck, man? You won't find any Aerodosian stuff here. After they both cough, Rudius continued. Let's get back to business. Yeah, so I guess there's not really anything here. I mean, I can draw weird conclusions but it seems like everything's pretty standard. I think when I first read through this, I was like, I wonder if you can probably dig something out of this. I don't think there really is. Again, it goes back to Orsted and them researching the curse. It goes back to the Man God meeting. I was kind of curious if she would actually mention something about that meeting. Then going back to the threesome that he had with Roxy and Sylphie, obviously, because again, this keeps going backwards. And she says 2 at once. Then again, I keep going back, and then it gets to the altar in the basement, and it's got the Pantsus in there. And it seems like it stops there. But I'm curious as they continue to talk if she's still looking further and further in. Because my assumption is I'm wondering if at some point she's going to reveal that she knows about his previous life. Because this is a really interesting way to kind of get to that conclusion that she'll have that knowledge. Not that it affects anything, really. It might increase his importance to her in sort of an oddity that she wants to keep track of, or at least support. Let's get back to business. Yes, that sounds good. The blessed child seeing all that wouldn't cause him any problems. But it was a bit embarrassing having someone know about it. First, I want to know how this happened. Who do you think was pulling the strings here? I imagine it's either His Holiness the Pope or the Cardinalist who wants to depose him. I shouldn't think that the Man God's involved. You don't think the Latrias are involved? It's possible that someone else is using them, but I don't think they're behind all this. So Zen's abduction wasn't related. Right now, they were down to the Populist and the Cardinalist. What makes you think the Man God isn't involved? If His Holiness were to submit to the Man God, it would bring disgrace upon the whole of the Mills Church. His Holiness may not be a good person, but I cannot fault his faith. But how can you be so sure? When I look into his eyes, I shall know. Reese wondered if he could even trust her. Yeah, this goes back to earlier. It's like, yeah, she might see that he is very faithful, but it only takes one visit with the Man God, and the Man God is say, do this, and you can claim that throne. And it could be the last time that she looked into his eyes was before he had a visit with the Man God. Again, I think this is like a front-facing thing versus the truth. That at face value, they're not supposed to accept the idea of this Man God or somebody calling themselves, Millis. But in reality, behind the curtains, this is their real self. I'll use anything to get that throne. If you don't trust me, you'll be best served using me as a hostage to get what you want. I'm not holding enough cards to make that work. The Temple Knights are probably already moving on me. Even if I demand something in exchange for you, I'm everything to the Temple Knights. Cutting him off, she smiled dreamily. The Temple Knights, no, the whole demon expulsionist faction, know that if I die, they'd lose their chance of victory. Basically, whatever they try to tell me, if I go hardball and threaten to kill you, they'll do anything I want. I flatter myself to say yes, I am that valuable. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. Again, this is a person who has been classified and trusted by the royalty itself. It is obviously what has gained them a lot of favor. It is a very powerful and very useful tool. So sure, I don't see why not. Rudius really wondered, but he better not have to watch Aisha die in front of him just because he trusted the blessed child. The Temple Knights aren't dumb. And they're not incompetent either. For all I know, they arrested Aisha and already got the location out of her. Hell, they wouldn't even have to do that. If they were keeping an eye on me, they'll come looking right away. They could charge in and rescue you while making demands at the church headquarters. Then clearly you should take me with you when you make your demands. Bold move, but if they ambush us on the way there, it could turn into an all-out battle. Surely you could take down a lot of them. You held your own against the likes of Sir Orsted and Auber, did you not? She's seen that too. Well, yeah, again, she got back to the Pantsu. If she got back before the threesome, then yeah, she's seen that. Sure, it was possible to hold off the Temple Knights. Not to brag, but he'd done his fair share of mowing down small-timers. Back at the garden, he was holding himself back. But if he'd been fighting the kill, they wouldn't stand a chance. Again, yeah, technically he's taken down waves of people in that whole war. Yeah, it was more the fact that he was holding himself back that made things difficult. Not killing people's technically harder than killing people. If you don't have that limiter of taking a life, it's harder. Besides, if we were attacked, it would be by the Populist, not the Temple Knights. How do you figure?
The Temple Knights won't do anything that could risk my death. The Pope, on the other hand, would be delighted if I had happened to die. It made sense that publicly, the populace protected the blessed child. But if she got killed in crossfire, that'd be good news to him. Yeah, it's like they're like, oh, we must save the blessed child. Save her. Ah, damn. I swung a little too hard and she was behind him and it just happened to hit her neck. Oopsie. They would just blame the death on Rudius. They would. What if the Temple Knights use barrier magic or something to steal you back without risking getting you hurt? You just defeat the best fighters of the Temple Knights. It's not their style to repeat the failing strategy. They wouldn't take that risk. Those were their best fighters, Rudius thought. They coordinated well, but seriously? No, that wasn't fair. They were good enough to keep firing magic, even when they were dodging. And that guy didn't hesitate to try to go up against his magic armor. Yeah, there's also a point to be made here, and Rudius keeps making it for himself. Rudius keeps making a point himself that he was holding back, and thus it took longer. It was harder to do because he didn't want to kill them. The reverse is true as well. They were supposedly not trying to kill Rudius, so they were holding back as well. So it technically works both ways there. Assuming they were on average, advanced level, sword god style, and water god style, with intermediate attack, barrier, and healing, they were a seriously elite and versatile team. While some individual variation to account for, their seamless coordination was a testament to their overall caliber. Well, Ch3 was a class below the others, but she was a capable commander. Yeah, that was like a question mark there of why Ch3 is leading them. And it seems to imply over this period of time that it's because she's a good commander. The only part where she slipped up was the end there. She was doing a really good job. She had a strategy and everything. She built a strategy to protect her. But it wasn't until the end that she slipped up and she got overtaken by the shock. And she should have been still calling orders even then, but she failed at that point. But the rest of it, she did well. But there's always been a question mark of why she's in that position. Why Ch3? The assumption has always kind of been because of the fact that she is of the Latreus family. Like I was saying before, even though she messed up and they kicked her out to this port town, maybe the Latreus used their connections to bring her back and have her protect the blessed child. And it could be because she's a Latria, she's most trusted for that position. Like, they're not going to just let any family take command of that group because they trust her enough because she's a Latria. So it could be both. She's a good commander, she's a strategist, but it could also be because what her position is in her family, she's the most trusted for that role. He was pretty sure that he could have held his own without version 1, but they wouldn't have had a real shot. Maybe the blessed child was right. Aren't there missionary knights and sanctuary knights as well? Those orders serve holy country of Milis. They don't get involved in petty squirrels of the church. Besides, the missionary knights are out of the country at present, so they weren't even here. That made Rudius think that he had a chance. He'd show his hostage and engage them in a fair, honest negotiation. After a violent attack, the almighty Rudius, follower of Orsted, had taken offense. He'd be within his rights to draw and quarter the blessed child and cast down the light of the holy country of Milis, but he'd be merciful. He'd spare the blessed child if they met his demands and apologized. Work in progress. He'd go with that. While he negotiated, he'd get the blessed child to work out who betrayed him, as well as the identities of the man God's disciples. It was possible that some of this would come and bite him in the ass. But assuming the negotiation went smoothly, he was confident that he'd get out of this country unscathed. The mercenary band would probably have to wait, which was fine. He'd come back in a few years once Cliff established himself as a major player. Reese would have to keep an eye on things, though. If the Pope was a disciple of the man God, Reese would have no choice but to tear Cliff away from his ambitions in Milis. That wouldn't be fair to him, but sometimes life was unfair. Yeah, right here again, bring up the idea that if the Pope does end up being a disciple, sorry, Cliff. Now, it sort of says, I had no choice but to tear Cliff away from his ambitions of Milis. It's almost like saying he's going to take him, just tell him to get out of... It's almost implying that he's not going to kill the Pope, he's just going to get Cliff out of there. But I think he would probably kill the Pope. If the other knight's orders concern you, I suggest you act sooner rather than later. If they did arrest one of your friends, the longer we wait, the more likely something terrible will happen. Agreed. Only an hour passed since he kidnapped her. The worst case scenario was that Aisha and Geese were already under arrest, but there was no way the knights had time to both arrest and torture them. Still, the longer they were hiding, the more desperate they would come. Yeah, that's true. The next part would be a gamble. If it goes wrong, someone was going to die along with the blessed child. He had to be ready for that. Reese wanted to feel ready, but he didn't. What he wanted was a trump card to store up his sleeve. Hey, yes? Why you help me anyways? How come you just stood by and let me kidnap you? She gazed, puzzled, then smiled softly. Now that was a smile befitting the symbol of the Mills Church. There's that smile. I owe my life to you and the warrior of the superb tribe. What? What? Did she see that in his memories? Or did she look into Edis's memories last time? Impossible to say, but it was Rogerd and Rudius who brought Edis to Milis last time. He was skeptical all the same. Her answer was too much like what he wanted to hear. Yeah, I don't see her seeing this. Because if she had to sit there that long to get to the point where she's seen the threesome, it would have taken probably 4 times as long to get all the way back to here, this point. It's weird. It is very weird. Yeah, it does make me believe that what he's sort of saying is that did he look into Edis's memories back there and seeing that Rijerd and Rudius brought Edis, or at least gave her safety to bring her here? Then yeah, she could say that. But why would she say specifically, why are you doing this to me? I owe you and the warrior of the superb tribe. I owe you and Rijerd a debt. Why? Edis saved her. And again, you could say by proxy, and he's going by that, you could say by proxy they brought her here and she could have seen through Edis that they brought them there. Does that not convince you? Then how about this? I was angry. Angry to see my new friend and my most trusted servants forced to kill one another. I also want to thank you for all the time you spent with me, making me laugh, and for the picture you made for me. As Millis says, thou shalt be gracious and repay that which thou receivest. From the beginning, I intended to find a way to help you in secret when you came seeking assistance on your mother's behalf. But you did not ask of it of me. After Rudius didn't say anything in response, the blessed child pouted. You only kidnapped me in the first place because a single glance told you that I wasn't your enemy. Isn't that right? I suppose. This sounds a little more convincing because it tracks. This part makes sense because it tracks. She's like, yeah, I said this. That doesn't convince you? Okay, let me get into further details. But technically that does track with if, again, she looked into Edis's memories and seen Rijerd and Rudius, and now she's attaching it to this new self or this new point in their life, and then she's applying it to everything else. Initially, when she first met Rudius and everything started unfolding, very quickly they established that the blessed child is working with Therese to help Rudius. So when Therese was talking to Rudius, the blessed child walks up and she's like, sorry, I'm talking about personal stuff. She's like, no, I want you to help him. I want you to help the person who is the husband of Edis. That all tracks. Again, it tracks with this right here. I've been wanting to help you because you're so nice to me. And that, I give a little bit of credits to. I give some credits to. I think it makes sense that she's like, I was angry because my new friend, who spent time with me, making me laugh, who made a picture for me, I would probably put this in that realm of sort of the caged bird idea here, where somebody is trapped in the cage for very much their entire life. Ever since she was, nearly assassinated, she's been caught in this cage. She only comes out to talk to people for different occasions. She goes back to her rooms. Get her back in there. Close her up. Okay, it's time for her walkies. Let's put the collar on. Let's take her out for her walkies. She go in the garden, and sometimes she'll get to talk to different people that come there. But most of the time, it's just her with her little entourage. And there's a disconnect that can probably come from that entourage, that they're just there as performative. They're always with me. They're always, because of my position, they're always going to see that I'm beautiful and the greatest thing ever. And they may be, and she might even look into their eyes and see they're not really being truthful. I think they're truthful because it seems like they're all fanatical about her. I mean, even Rudius said that. These are fanatics. These guys are treating her like she is something special, which, again, goes to what her position is. But now Rudius comes in the picture, and he's sort of an outsider that is... It kind of goes in that whole realm of something where most people, when they see the blessed child, they're going to hide their eyes. They're going to be fearful of her. They're afraid to be around her because if I was in this world and I seen the blessed child, I would probably stay away from her. Not because I would see her as a bad person, but because I would be fearful that if I got near her, the slightest misstep and you'd be struck down because they'd be afraid of you taking her or harming her. She's a walking eggshell. Do not bump into her because you're dead. And Rudius comes into her life and he's not that. He's making her happy and making her laugh and doing things with her and telling her stories. This is something that she appreciates. Again, it's the caged bird mentality. Just like with Benedict. Again, it kind of played out Benedict's story, the entrance of it, the same as the blessed child. Being stuck in this little cage, her seclusion from the outside world. And then Pax showed up and tells her all these stories, and she liked the stories. Same thing here. So it all tracks. The only thing that kind of puzzles me is that aspect of you and the warrior of the Spurred tribe, not Edis. So yeah, I think this all tracks. I think she wants to help. And again, I was assuming that originally. I was assuming because she's a tool, because she's a caged bird, because he makes her happy, because he makes her laugh, she'll want to help. Not just because of Edis, but because he's a good person, a new friend. And she knew that he wasn't going to do something to harm her, and that she was going to trust him, and that she wanted to help him whatever way she could. I wanted to repay you, but you never asked me. You never asked of something of me. You were talking to Therese. I wanted to help you, but you never asked me. And I like this, that she's literally questioning him. Why are you even questioning this? You knew the moment you looked at me that I wasn't your enemy, so that's why you swooped me up, right? He had thought about that. That was why he grabbed her right away, and how he ended up back here, having this conversation. Right. It was too late for second thoughts. Ending up on the back foot is what got him in this mess, and thinking isn't going to make it better. When he went next, he needed to make sure that it was a stronger position than what he wanted. This time, he was going to make the first move while he had drawn a good card, the Blessed Child. Not that he was a dud card himself. The thing to do now was to make his first turn without warning, before yet another idiot who didn't understand what was going on could complicate things. It's like a random jab at Geese. Before some idiot who doesn't understand what the hell's going on would complicate things. I guess you could say Wendy. He could be talking about Wendy too, but I think he's talking about Geese. Dumb idiot went and took all this started because Geese went and took Zenith out for a walkie. Damn it. If this all gets worked out and I don't make enemies, I'll bring Edis to visit next time. Please do. Back at the church they went. It must have been 2 to 3 hours since the fight with Therese's gang. There wasn't a single temple knight on the streets. It was almost eerie. That had to mean that Geese and Cliff hadn't informed on him. He gotten himself and the Blessed Child out of the garden with teleportation. Most of society didn't know teleportation circles existed. Never mind scrolls. The temple knights had sealed away the entrance to the garden, so the logical assumption was that he and the Blessed Child was still inside. It would take whoever was in charge maybe an hour to deduce that they'd gotten out, and then they'd move to the next step, calling the rest of the temple knights to search the city. Another hour to put together a search team, another hour for holdups. By now, they might have locked down the city gates, but yet to mobilize. Cliff and Geese were both aware of the teleportation circles. Geese was there when Reese set up the emergency escape route. Cliff helped when he drew the teleportation circle in the basement in Shiraya. More to the point, Cliff and Geese hadn't turned on him. That's a good point. It's a good point. If they had gotten to them yet, though. That's assuming that they've even gotten to them yet. The Temple Knights would know what the teleportation circle led to. Thus, they could both be ruled out right now as snitches. Both the Pope and the Cardinals should have guessed that he was getting around using teleportation circles. I was wondering when they would bring this up. I talked about this quite a while ago. That all these stories are getting out, that Reese are going on to all these locations, doing all these crazy things. Hint? At some point, if there's these stories where he's everywhere around the world, constantly doing things, again, travel around the world takes years. So if he's doing stuff everywhere, there's word of him doing all these crazy things, helping Orsted with all these jobs, it's got to get to people's ears. That seems a little weird. Unless he's flying, seems a little weird. They collected enough intel on him. The same went if the man guy was pulling the strings. All suspects were ruled out. It was weird. Just a few hours had passed, but surely his opponent was back-footed. There was no way that Therese had actually been acting alone, right? Arriving at the church headquarters while he mused, a procession of dudes in blue armor came filing out. It's the Blessed Child! Reese brought the Blessed Child! Call for reinforcements! More and more emerged from the church and the city around them. In that moment, they were surrounded. Sir Brutus, whatever you do, don't let go of me. She was his lifeline. He kept his grip on her arms. None of the Temple Knights had their swords out, but they sounded pretty upset. They weren't going to risk hurting her, just as she said. How could you treat her with such violence? By taking the Blessed Child hostage, you bring shame upon all the believers of Millis. You won't get away with this. Rudius, you bastard. Even I have never laid hands on the Blessed Child. That must be dust. That must be dust. I never got to touch her. You get to touch her. I never got to touch her. He's got to grub his hands on her arms. Her cute, petite arms. Or chunky arms, sorry. To him, it's probably petite. That was an interesting thing to be mad about. Before he could get a word in, everyone assumed the Blessed Child was a hostage. They weren't wrong. After knocking out the guards and spiriting away, what else would one think? Maybe whoever was behind all this knew how it'd look. Captain, let's get him. After his fight with the Keepers of Anastasia, he can't have that much magic left. Yeah, that's right. I don't think Dust is actually there. I don't think the Keepers are there yet. She does show up eventually, though. Not yet. He must have enough in reserve to kill the Blessed Child. No problem. If we can all attack, he'll save his own skin before he tries to harm her. One kept rallying up the others. Was that the Mastermind's agent? Who does he serve? The Man God? No. He works for His Holiness the Pope. He has no connection to the Man God. I don't think he knows the details of what happened. Oh yeah. Reese was just getting paranoid. It was time to get ball rolling. Yeah, he's like, this guy keeps rallying it up. Like, he wants her dead. Is he a man god person? No, he's just working for the Pope, so he doesn't mind if I get killed. Rudius, chill. They just do this because he okay with me going down. I demand to speak with the Pope about today's events. Out of my way. How dare you? You think the Pope will grant an audience with a worm like you? Release the blessed child at once and face judgment. After they drew their swords, the blessed child twitched in Rudius' arms, causing them to begrudgingly return their swords to their scabbards. They were totally powerless against her. Her twitching, oh damn it, we've been defeated. She was literally an idol to them. My name is Rudius Greyrat. I represent the dragon god Orsted. I swear upon his mighty name that I do not wish to harm the blessed child. Rudius showed his bracelet that Orsted gave him. It wasn't the strongest proof of identity, but it made for a decent bluff. However, if my request to speak with the Pope is denied, I cannot guarantee her safety. Know that making an enemy of Rudius Greyrat, the Church of Millis will be the enemy of the dragon god, and all of his followers. Rudius was playing hardball here. He'd even memorized his little speech. He was using Orsted's name without permission, but that'd be fine. Also, he didn't actually have that many followers. The Temple Knights recoiled and stepped away. With just a few words, it made them see that he wasn't a petty child kidnapper, but a big deal with an organization backing them. I demand an explanation from His Holiness himself for the disgraceful assault I suffered earlier today. Why was an attempt made on the life of the Dragon God's representative? Why is my mother being held captive? The answer to these questions will decide whether or not the blessed child lives or dies. Rudius was just a visitor here. One day, without warning, he was accused of plotting a kidnapping, was attacked. Now he's mad, wanted an apology and compensation. While he was here, he was making Zenith the Holy Church's problem too. Yeah, I mean, it's a good strategy. Yeah, I mean, something happens, you got to figure out. It is a good thing. What he's sort of doing here is rather than turning it into a hostage thing where he's going, give me Zenith back and I'm going to get out of here, he's making it that you wronged me. And it is sort of a show of good favor that he's coming there with the blessed child unharmed to go, but I'm going to use her to get the answers I want and prove my innocence. It is sort of nice that things play out the way that it does play out, and that's partly because he already has an established relationship with Pope. Literally him going in there, he's at the beck and call of the Pope. The Pope could totally make him out to be the enemy, and everybody would probably go along with it. He's lucky the Pope goes along with this, because he is technically coming in there as with a gesture of good faith, that the blessed child is not harmed, that the knights that he fought earlier are alive, despite having a connection with the dragon god. What are we supposed to do? He's got the blessed child as a hostage. Seemed they didn't want to make the call themselves. Maybe a commander would show up eventually. Let him through. Get out of the way. Are you going to let the blessed child be killed in front of us? From behind the men, 4 men and a woman pushed their way through. 3 of them were from the keepers of Anastasia. It hurt to look at the dents in their armor. One of the 3 was Therese, who immediately looked down in shame when she seen him. The 4th person was a man in his late 50s with a white beard. His face was covered up in deep wrinkles, but his gaze was sharp and youthful. Rudius had never seen him before, but he wore blue armor, the Temple Knight's uniform, but his armor was a little more elaborate than the others. Finally meet him, eh? We finally meet him. I am the commander of the Sword Company of the Temple Knights. My name is Carlisle Latria. It was Grandpa. I'm sorry that we have to meet under these circumstances. I'm Rudius Greyrat, son of Zenith Greyrat. Carlisle eyed Rudius like a hawk. His eyes were more piercing than Claire's. On that point, husband and wife resembled each other. Rudius didn't want to fall into a verbal tug of war with him. Is that all? No. It took a moment to figure out what he meant, but then Rudius remembered his exchange with Claire and shook his head. Here, Rudius was Orsa's follower. He was still Zenith's son, of course, but that wasn't the role that he was assuming here. There couldn't be a fair negotiation unless they seen each other as equals. I am Rudius Greyrat, representative of the dragon god Orsted. He puffed out his chest and stuck his chin out, like you'd typically see Edis do. I have come to demand an audience with His Holiness the Pope. Carlisle's face softened for a brief moment before his expression closed off again. I'll take you. Come. With that hard look fixed on his face, he turned and marched away. Yeah, that's a question mark. Is that all? Oh yeah, this too. I wonder if he's trying to give Rudius a little bit of a nudge there, like, dude, that it? Or is it are you sure you want to open it like that? Or is a simple, like, should I just, like, completely laugh at that introduction and then Rudius kind of fixes himself? I don't know. It seems like he's kind of giving Rudius a little bit of a nudge there. Carlisle technically could have a lot of respect for Rudius and what he's achieved. With that hard look fixed on his face, he turned and marched away. Therese and the others followed, looking troubled. What do you think? It appears that Therese was merely following the orders of the Cardinal. Carlisle wouldn't meet my eyes, so for him, I cannot say. That was a handy trick. So Carlisle was a mystery. He didn't feel like an enemy, but Rudius didn't trust him. Best to stay on guard. Rudius left the Temple Knights as he followed after Carlyle and the others. They were led directly into the inner sanctum. As they walked, the other members of the Keepers of Anastasia formed up around them. They weren't wearing helmets this time. All of them recovered thanks to healing magic. Rudius wasn't letting his guard down, but their plan clearly wasn't to attack. In a head-on battle, Rudius had broken their precious king tier barrier and soundly beat him to a pulp. While they hadn't been fighting to kill each other, Rudius had gone easy on them. They knew that the best fighter was established. On top of that, Rudius had the blessed child. They weren't about to pick a fight. Still, they all looked awkward, especially Mr. Dust. He'd been avoiding Rudius' eyes the whole time. You're touching her right now, damn it. I don't know. Maybe Dust at this point is accepting Rudius as an equal. The idea of, man, we both like this girl. We both like her. And you're super strong, so, you have to become the alpha. There wasn't a feeling of hostility, and they didn't seem wary of Rudius at all. It was almost as if they were guarding Rudius. Yeah, there is a side of me almost believes because, again, Therese indicates the idea they all knew Rudius wasn't going to do this. Again, Dust was jealous, but Dust was saying that Rudius liked her. They all liked Rudius. He made Blessed Child happy. That's all we care about. We all love Blessed Child. He understands how great the Blessed Child is. He's making her smile. She's been more chippery lately. She's so happy lately. He's making her smile more, which we want to see. They know Rudius is like a bro. Bring that guy into the order. If he would declare faith to the Millis Church, bring that guy into our order. He'd be a broski, a fellow idol. But they were forced to do this. And then they got soundly beat to a pulp. And he didn't kill them. And he hasn't harmed the Blessed Child. And he's brought her back. I think there's an idea here where they fully trust Rudius at this point. We know he's not going to do something bad to her. They kept walking through the inner sanctum for a while. Before Rudius knew it, he had lost all sense of direction. Blame it on the slight curve of the passage, combined with the 70-degree corners they turned. Last time he was here, he thought the twisty maze of passages were all too alike. This is like a labyrinth. Indeed, it was built this way so the Pope can make a quick escape if necessary. So it wasn't barrier magic, or something of that nature then. Rudius didn't need to worry about being suddenly put to sleep by tripping over a booby trap. That's right. The Blessed Child knows every inch of this passageway. She always used to get away from us when we played tag. See, they're almost like sharing extra information with them. Of course, they're all like just talking up her. So it was designed this way to let important people get out. Standard security. But Rudius was starting to lose track of where he was. If he was ambushed from behind, there'd be no way out. No, he could just smash through the ceiling or the walls. Though they probably had some sort of barrier magic, so he'd have to use Sword of Absorption in order to take care of that. Yeah, he probably should have thought this through more before he dove in. But everything would be fine. Yeah, it would have probably been smart to call them out. No, bring the Pope here. No, now, there's a reason why they end up bringing him to a specific location, and it would be hard to bring everybody out there, but if it was just to see the Pope, he could have called him out. Are we almost there? I'd rather not go far in, just a little farther. Carlyle spoke as he looked back. Rudius hoped that he wasn't luring him to a trap. He turned a wary eye to the other guys who were behind them. They all flinched, then started protesting. Lord Carlyle, you mustn't be rude. At least turn around when you address him. Who knows what he might do to the Blessed Child if he gets upset. My lord, look at these dents. Do you see what he did to the Temple Knight's armor? He wields incredible power. Imagine the horrible mark that he might leave on the Blessed Child if we offend him. Silence, all of you. As Therese roared, the otaku shut up. Carlyle stopped walking, then turned, slowly to face Rudius, just a little further. Thank you. Rudius nodded, and they continued on. Very interesting that he stops and turns and says that. The power dynamic in this scene is weird to me. I'm sorry, the power dynamic in this scene is weird to me. What this power dynamic makes me feel, because again, Carlyle is above these guys. In power, he is far above these guys. Unless they give some sort of equal or extra power to those that are supposed to be defending the Blessed Child, which I doubt it, it should be Carlyle, Therese, the Temple Knights, the Otaku Knights. And they're protesting before Therese tells him to stop, but then Carlyle turns around and responds to what they were telling him to do. They were telling a superior, stop, you're being mean, and he could do something mean to the Blessed Child. This almost makes me feel like there's a comfort here, but there's still a little bit of fear, so they're making those comments, like he could do this. But yes, technically, by them stating this stuff, does make me believe they genuinely are afraid of Rudius doing something to her. I think they have a trust for Rudius, but they also have a fear because of what he just did. I guess that's the best way to put it. We trust that he won't harm her, but we have seen what he's capable of doing, and we don't want that to happen to her, and she's technically threatened that, as he has come here. But it's weird that Carlisle listens to them. He goes along with it. It's a weird power dynamic here. It's very weird. After another 10 steps, Carlisle stopped in front of a door. Like, they were literally almost there. I have brought Reus Greyrat to see you, your holiness. It really was just a little bit further. Reus felt bad for rushing him. Now that he thought about it, he didn't know which direction he was facing anymore. But they had only actually turned 2 corners. If he needed an escape route, he had one. Enter. Carlisle faced the door, said a brief prayer, then opened it. He held the door and gestured Reus to enter. Go ahead. Keeping his grip firm on the blessed child, Reus went into the room. Part of him thought that he could let her go now, but no. He couldn't let his guard down. He found himself in what looked like a meeting room. There was a long table with 10 people who sat facing each other. One of them was the Pope. Cliff was there too. An old man wearing a luxurious vestment similar to the Pope's. That had to be the Cardinal. There was also a man clad in white armor. In the back of the room, 7 knights stood with their hands clasped behind their backs. 2 of them Reus recognized as the Pope's guards. Everyone was looking at Reus. It looked like his entrance had interrupted a fierce debate. Nope, they were there for you. At the end of the table sat 2 more people. One was an old lady, her lips in a hard line as she glared at Reus. Claire Latria. Beside her, a woman gazed up at the ceiling with empty eyes. She was close to her 40s, but she looked younger. The woman Reus's father loved more than anyone else in the world. It was his mother, Zenith. The Pope got her to bring her in. The Pope got her to bring her in. Why were they there? What's going on? He hadn't made any demands yet. He hadn't told anyone to bring Zenith to him. The door slammed shut behind Rudius, shattering the silence. The Temple Knights moved in position in front of it, standing in a row. Teresa alone took position at the table. Now that every piece is on the board, let's talk, shall we? Apparently, a lot had happened in the last few hours. So much for making the first move. Reus was a pawn in someone else's plan. Again. Reus sighed and clenched his teeth. Rudius, blessed child, won't you take your seats? It seemed like Rudius had a talent for getting caught off guard, but he hadn't lost yet. And that is chapter 4. My gosh. This recording went on longer than I did in order to get to chapter 5, and now I'm questioning if I should go through chapter 5. Because chapter 5 is the juicy stuff. Because chapter 5 is the juicy stuff. Let me take a break and think about it. I'm going to cut it off there. I'm sorry. I'm going to cut it off there. The next chapter is super long. Like, it's almost the length of these last 2 chapters. I can't do it. I want to do it. I can't do it. But yes, anyways, that was chapter 4, or 3 and 4. Really good set of chapters. Really a lot of fun stuff. I will admit, there's a side of me that's a little disappointed in what has sort of pushed back on Rudius as regards to fights. Now, something can come up. He could totally run into something here soon, but there is a side of me that's almost like a little bit let down that the Holy Country of Emilis. Now, granted, they haven't indicated that the Temple Knights is the strongest of the strong. That this group, the Anastasia group, is like the strongest of the strong. It is a very strong group. The Blessed Child has said how strong they are, and if he could take them out, he's perfectly fine. And they're still like the Crusaders. The Crusaders could be a lot stronger, but it's like, you would think they have some people that are... all they've indicated so far is that we have a saint tier level person. Where's the higher tier people? Like, is this the strongest of the strong? Is there more people? And yes, question mark, is Reus actually going to run into them? That's the question mark. Again, this could just be a story arc where Reus doesn't have to face anything super strong. I mean, I'm perfectly fine with, we don't have to have every story arc he has to run into a god tier person, a king tier person. He might just run into a bunch of people that are saint lower, has a little bit of a fight, and then move on. Like, this could all be resolved politically. This could all be resolved just through words, which Rudius is worst at. So that's actually a bigger challenge for him than facing, king tier people. But anyways, I was a little bit let down by just how weak they were. I mean, these people are protecting this beacon of hope for the country, and they're that weak. I don't know. It seems weird. Like Randolph could go in there and take out the Blessed Child. Like, there's so many people that we've already met so far that could easily walk in there and grab the Blessed Child if Rudius took them down that easily. Again, he probably could have taken him out without even getting in his armor. He only got in his armor, I believe, because it was harder to take them down without killing them that he used the armor. If he was killing them, he probably would have done it really easily without the armor. So it's a little weird there, but yes, I love the Blessed Child. Like, so far, and yes, I'm kind of
my brain is digging a little bit into the next chapter. I love the Blessed Child. I think so far she's super cool, super sweet. I'm looking forward to more of her, but again, I really do feel like she truly, honestly wants to help Rudius. I think there is an element of, yes, because Edis saved my life, I still think that she peered into Orchid's eyes at some point in this timeline and possibly seen how easily she died. And I think that's like an element that she is appreciative of what Edis did. But there's also a side of it where I'm like wondering if she did peer into Orchid's eyes, she'd be a little bit more concerned about going out there. And maybe it's just a bit that wasn't in one of those timelines that she went out there and got attacked by assassins. Things kind of played out differently. Again, because the displacement incident happened. Everything in this timeline is changed for Orsted. That aside, I think she's great. She's super sweet. She's kind of bumping it there in one of my favorite characters. Hopefully they do something really cool with her soon. She's already has a really cool moment in the next chapter that I'm looking forward to, but just no hesitation. The moment that Rudius shows up, take me. Come on, take me. I'll help you out. I'm your way out of there. I'm your ticket. Come on, Rudius. That plays into what she said. She's literally like, you never asked me for help. Well, no crap. She reached out her hands like, come on, Rudius, take me. Finally, I can help you. Finally, I can repay you for making me smile. Finally, I can repay you for making me laugh. Finally, I can repay you for bringing Edis over there. Again, if that's what she's talking about. Again, that whole idea of her saying you and the Warrior of Superds, is that just strictly that aspect? It kind of makes me wonder, is it just that, or did he save her previously? Did he do something to save her life before then? She's got to be just strictly talking about bringing Edis there. It's just strictly that. So, anyways, good stuff. Good stuff. But yeah, when I got to this point, before I read chapter 5, I was like, Pope. It's totally the damn Pope. He's just orchestrating this all. And he's like, come on in, Rudius. We got everybody here ready for you. Let's go. But yeah, anyways, I'm sorry. I'm going to cut it off here. I appreciate you guys dropping by. I hope you guys enjoyed this premiere. Hey, chat. Hope you guys are doing well. Hopefully you guys will join me for next week. I'm probably going to do chapter 5 next week, and then I will do a live recording of 6 and 7. That's what everybody says I want to do a live recording of, and I think apparently those two go really well together. So we'll do 5 next week, and then do 6 and 7 together, and then we'll go on from there. So hopefully you guys can be patient. It's going to be a great next chapter anyways, so next week is going to be a lot of fun as well, but I hope you guys enjoy. As always, if you did, hit that like button before you guys leave. It's a great way to support without having to do anything else, but as per usual, greatly appreciate you guys' kind words, being here. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you guys have a great rest of your week, and yes, also greatly appreciate everybody that supports the channel monetarily through Patreon, tips, links, super thanks, memberships, all that stuff. It means a great deal to me. Until the next Mushoku Mondays, I hope you all enjoyed. And y'all take care. Barky bark bark, but Tree said that her information came from